16,800 seats, a $95 million renovation, weekly attendance topping 45,000 souls. By 2019, Lakewood Church had become the largest congregation in America, a sprawling empire built inside a former NBA arena, complete with waterfalls and broadcast-quality lighting. Joel Osteen's net worth climbed past $50 million. Then came December 2020. Federal records revealed the tax-exempt Megachurch had collected $4.4 million in PPP loans meant for struggling small businesses. The building that once housed championship basketball now housed a different kind of game. They called it ministry. The receipts suggested something else. By July 2005, when Lakewood Church held its first service inside the former Compaq Center, the Houston faithful watched stadium lights sweep across 16,800 seats, originally designed for NBA fans cheering the Rockets. The renovation had taken 15 months. Workers had installed indoor waterfalls flanking a 200-person choir platform. They laid 500,000 square feet of carpet over concrete that once bore the weight of championship celebrations. Locker rooms became nurseries. Concession stands transformed into a unified food court. The Hartford Institute for Religion Research defines a megachurch as any Protestant congregation averaging 2,000 or more weekly attendees. By that measure, Lakewood wasn't merely mega. It was unprecedented, the largest Protestant church building in the United States. More than 45,000 people passed through its doors every week, filling multiple services. Millions more watched Joel Osteen's broadcasts across 100 countries on networks, including ABC Family, Pax TV, and BET. The feed store, where his father had started the ministry in 1959, was now a distant memory. The economics behind the operation were staggering. According to church statements and media reports, Lakewood's annual budget approached $70 million by the mid-2010s. The revenue model combined traditional tithes with book sales, speaking fees, merchandise, and television syndication rights. Osteen's 2007 book advance alone reportedly reached $13 million for a single title. Unlike virtually every other nonprofit organization in America, churches file no Form 990 with the IRS. No annual financial disclosure. No public accounting of every penny donated and spent. The financial black hole was entirely legal. The prosperity gospel formula had found its perfect vessel, a charismatic preacher who smiled through every broadcast, never mentioning hell or judgment, promising instead that God wanted believers to be wealthy, healthy, and happy. As Osteen wrote in Your Best Life Now, God wants us to be prosperous. The title wasn't just marketing, it was a business model that scaled to arena proportions. The Osteen brand expanded through carefully managed media appearances and political access. By 2007, Joel and Victoria graced the cover of People magazine, the smiling faces of American Christianity. Texas Governor Rick Perry attended the arena's grand opening. The family occupied a 17,000-square-foot mansion in Houston's prestigious River Oaks neighborhood, valued at approximately $10.5 million. Church representatives consistently emphasized that Osteen drew no salary from Lakewood. His income derived entirely from books and speaking engagements. But critics noticed the widening gap between the prosperity message and the lifestyle it enabled. In October 2007, the 60 Minutes aired a 12-minute segment titled, Joel Osteen Answers His Critics. Reformed theologian Michael Horton told correspondent Byron Pitts that Osteen's message constituted heresy because it makes religion about us instead of about God. Pastor John Piper called prosperity theology sinister. The faithful filled those 16,800 seats regardless, week after week. But what the cameras never captured would soon become impossible for even the most devoted believer to ignore. On the 25th of August 2017, Hurricane Harvey made landfall near Rockport, Texas, as a Category 4 storm carrying winds exceeding 130 miles per hour. Over the following 5 days, Houston received nearly 50 inches of rain, record-breaking totals that turned highways into rivers and entire neighborhoods into lakes. The National Weather Service described the flooding as catastrophic and life-threatening. Tens of thousands of residents fled, flooded homes seeking refuge wherever they could find it. The George R. Brown Convention Center opened as an emergency shelter and quickly exceeded its 5,000-person capacity, eventually housing more than 10,000 evacuees in increasingly desperate conditions. Then social media noticed something that seemed impossible to explain. Lakewood Church, the 16,800-seat arena, sitting on 7 acres with massive parking facilities, just off Highway 59, one of the largest indoor spaces in Houston, remained closed to storm victims. On Sunday, August 27, as waters continued rising across the city, the church posted on Facebook, "Dear Houstonians, Lakewood Church is inaccessible due to severe flooding. We want to help make sure you are safe." The post directed displaced residents to other shelters around the city. Critics immediately questioned whether the massive building was actually flooded. Local residents drove past the facility and began posting videos on Twitter showing relatively dry conditions around the building's exterior and parking structures. The church's response evolved rapidly under pressure. Spokesman Don Eloff cited safety concerns and ongoing coordination with city officials. Joel Osteen told CBS News, "Our doors have always been open. We received people even as soon as the water started receding." He blamed social media for creating what he called a false narrative, insisting, "This building flooded in 2001, the whole bottom floor. It would have been a safety concern at the start." Photos showed some flooding in the building's underground parking areas and lower levels, but questions persisted about why the massive main sanctuary hadn't immediately opened as a shelter when the city desperately needed space. The contrast was unavoidable. A furniture store owner named Jim Mackingvale, Mattress Mac, had thrown open his showroom doors to evacuees and even dispatched trucks to pick up stranded residents. The man selling mattresses had responded faster than the man preaching prosperity. The fallout rippled through national media for weeks after the initial storm passed. Multiple outlets reported conflicting accounts that seemed impossible to fully reconcile. Snopes investigated the flooding claims and found the situation mixed. Some basement flooding had clearly occurred based on photos the church released. But videos from residents who lived nearby showed exterior areas and parking structures appeared largely accessible during the critical early days. The church maintained that genuine safety risks from potential flooding justified their initial decision to remain closed. By Tuesday, August 29, after sustained online criticism became impossible to ignore and public pressure mounted, Lakewood finally opened as a distribution center. Volunteers arrived in force throughout the day. Supplies flowed in and out by the truckload. By the church's official account, they eventually sheltered hundreds of displaced families and distributed tens of thousands of supplies to storm victims across the region. But the damage to public perception was lasting. The hashtag number #TaxTheChurches trended on Twitter nationwide. Pastor John Pavlovitz, identifying himself as a minister, tweeted, "I'm a pastor. We should number tax the churches." Observers wondered aloud. When disaster struck Houston, why hadn't the house of God opened first? Was this institutional caution exercised in good faith, or institutional self-protection that prioritized property over people? The lingering question wasn't really about one particular storm or one particular church. It was whether this moment revealed a deeper pattern, a troubling gap between the prosperity gospel preached from the stage and the priorities practiced when genuine sacrifice was required. In December 2020, Houston Chronicle reporter Chris Matthews broke a story that confirmed suspicions many critics had harbored for years. Federal Paycheck Protection Program data showed Lakewood Church received $4.4 million in forgivable government loans, the third largest PPP loan in the entire Houston metropolitan area. The program was designed to help small businesses retain workers during the COVID-19 pandemic, distributed through the Small Business Administration. Church spokesman Donald Eloff defended the loan, noting Lakewood employed 368 full and part-time workers and had suspended in-person services for more than 7 months between March and October 2020. He emphasized that neither Joel nor Victoria Osteen received salaries from the church, so the funds provided them no personal financial benefit whatsoever. But critics pointed to an obvious and uncomfortable tension. Tax-exempt organizations that paid no federal taxes were now receiving taxpayer-funded relief originally intended for struggling small businesses. Lakewood wasn't alone in the controversy. According to Treasury Department data reported by Newsweek in July 2020, religious organizations across America received approximately $7.3 billion in PPP loans, totaling 88,411 separate loans. Joyce Meyer Ministries, a Missouri megachurch that had been the target of a 2007 to 2011 Senate Finance Committee investigation, was approved for between $5 million and $10 million. Churches affiliated with prominent Trump supporters accumulated at least $17.3 million. Meanwhile, a small gelato shop owner in Virginia received only $2,000. The average PPP loan nationwide was roughly $107,000. Lakewood's $4.4 million dwarfed that figure by a factor of 40. Reverend Jennifer Hawks of the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty warned that the program strains church-state principles and comes perhaps as close as we've seen in a government program to funding religion itself. By October 2021, facing mounting criticism and media scrutiny, Lakewood quietly announced it would repay the loan in full. Theological critics had been sounding alarms about prosperity theology for decades. Hank Hanegraaff, the nationally syndicated radio host known as the Bible Answer Man, called Osteen's message a dangerous distortion of Scripture. John Piper, an influential Reformed Baptist pastor, declared prosperity theology sinister because it transforms God from a sovereign being into a mechanism for acquiring material goods. The Gospel Coalition published multiple detailed critiques, labeling prosperity teachers as purveyors of false gospel that contradicts the New Testament's call to take up one's cross. The theological argument was sophisticated, but also deeply practical. When preachers promise that faith inevitably yields wealth, what happens to believers who remain poor despite fervent devotion? Critics argued the doctrine insidiously shifts blame onto congregants themselves. Your illness isn't random suffering in a fallen world, it's your personal lack of faith. Your poverty isn't systemic or circumstantial, it's spiritual failure requiring correction. The formula protected the institution while burdening the people it claimed to serve. Then came the 10th of November 2021. A Houston plumber named Justin Cawley was repairing a loose toilet inside Lakewood Church when he removed some tile and moved insulation behind the wall. Approximately 500 envelopes fell out, tumbling onto the bathroom floor in front of him. Inside the envelopes, cash and checks. Cawley immediately reported the discovery to church maintenance staff. Houston police confirmed the discovery appeared connected to a daughter the 9th of March, 2014 theft, when approximately $600,000 in cash and checks disappeared from a church safe. The theft had remained unsolved for 7 years. Now, the money had apparently been sitting behind a bathroom wall the entire time, hidden by someone who either couldn't return for it or chose not to. Crime Stoppers of Houston awarded Cawley $20,000 for his discovery and his decision to report it, rather than pocket the cash money that had originally been donated by Lakewood itself years earlier as part of the reward. For information about the original theft, the bizarre case raised far more questions than it ever answered. Who hid the money behind the wall? Were they interrupted before they could remove it? Did they die, get arrested, or simply forget? Why did they never return to retrieve hundreds of thousands of dollars over 7 years? The investigation remained officially open indefinitely. The envelopes remained an unexplained mystery. But for observers already skeptical of megachurch finances and accountability, the visual was impossible to ignore. Money literally falling out of the church walls. The Hartford Institute for Religion Research counts approximately 1,800 Protestant megachurches currently operating in the United States. congregations averaging 2,000 or more weekly attendees across all services. And locations. Their average Sunday attendance tops 4,000 people. Their average total annual income reached $4.8 million by their year 2000 study. Most are evangelical or Pentecostal in orientation. Most are non-denominational. Most feature contemporary worship styles with professional lighting, amplified music, and production values rivaling secular entertainment. That model creates specific vulnerabilities. When an institution depends on a charismatic senior leader who functions as the central brand, the institution becomes hostage to that personality. The business model demands crowds massive fixed costs for facilities, staff, and production, require massive attendance to sustain. The spectacle must continue indefinitely. The lights must stay bright every Sunday. Ministry becomes functionally indistinguishable from entertainment, and entertainment demands constant expansion to maintain interest. The pattern of personality-driven collapse has repeated across American Christianity with disturbing regularity. Mars Hill Church in Seattle, once boasting 15,000 weekly attendees across 15 locations, dissolved entirely in 2014 after founder Mark Driscoll faced accusations of bullying leadership, plagiarism, and inappropriate behavior. Willow Creek Community Church near Chicago, a pioneering megachurch model, saw its leadership structure implode following revelations about founder Bill Hybels' alleged misconduct. Hillsong, the Australian megachurch empire whose worship songs fill churches worldwide, watched its global brand crater amid scandals involving multiple pastors, including Carl Lentz. Each collapse shared troubling common elements: highly concentrated authority in a single charismatic figure, weak or non-existent external accountability structures, personality-driven cultures that discourage dissent, and financial arrangements opaque to congregants. Professor Scott McKnight of Northern Baptist Theological Seminary warned in 2018 that non-denominational megachurches specifically lack the institutional accountability that denominations historically provided. When the brand outgrows the mission, collapse becomes not merely possible, but statistically probable. The broader numbers tell a starker story about American religiosity itself. According to Gallup polling, weekly church attendance in America dropped from 42% in 2000 to just 30% by 2023. Church membership fell from 70% of Americans in 1999 to below 50% by 2020, the first time in Gallup's 80-year history of tracking that metric, that less than half of Americans belong to any house of worship. The decline accelerated dramatically during the COVID-19 pandemic and has not recovered to pre-pandemic levels. Lifeway research found that average congregations remain at roughly 85% of their pre-pandemic attendance as of 2023. Among young adults aged 18 to 29, the shift is even more dramatic. More than 1/3 now report no religious affiliation whatsoever. The share of Americans identifying as religiously unaffiliated rose from 9% in 2000 to 21% by 2023. But perhaps the deeper question isn't about declining numbers or empty seats. It's about what actually fills them and at what cost. By late 2024, Lakewood Church continued operating as America's largest single-site congregation. Joel Osteen still preached to thousands in person each weekend. The television ministry still reached millions globally. The books still sold. The building that once held Houston Rockets championship celebrations still held Sunday services and Wednesday gatherings. The PPP loan was repaid after public pressure made retention untenable. The Hurricane Harvey criticism faded into background noise as newer controversies captured attention. The cash discovered in the walls remained unexplained. The investigation still technically open. The theological critics kept publishing critiques that mostly reached those already skeptical. The faithful kept attending. What changed was harder to measure but impossible to ignore. A generation of Americans increasingly viewed organized religion with deep skepticism. Pew Research and Gallup consistently documented the trend. Trust, once fractured by scandal and silence, proved difficult, perhaps impossible, to fully repair. The empire still stood. The light still swept across the arena, but something in its foundation had shifted permanently. 16,800 seats still face the stage where Joel Osteen smiles each Sunday morning. The waterfalls still flow. The lights still sweep across the congregation. The production remains pristine, professional, broadcast-ready, indistinguishable from a concert venue. Whether this represents authentic ministry or sophisticated machinery depends entirely on whom you ask. Whether prosperity theology helps believers flourish or exploits their hopes remains fiercely debated among theologians. Whether megachurches genuinely serve their communities or primarily serve their leaders defies simple answers that satisfy everyone. What the receipts ultimately reveal is not a verdict, but an unresolved tension between stated mission and observable practice, between spiritual calling and material accumulation, between the humble gospel preached from the stage and the lifestyle lived behind the mansion gates. The seats are still there, waiting to be filled. The donations still flow, largely unaccounted. The question now is what fills those seats and what fills the people who sit in them. Share your thoughts below.